For more on Prime Minister Mark Carney's cabinet, we're joined by Cody Groat, Mohawk assistant professor in the Department of History and the Indigenous Studies at Western University in London, Ontario. Cody, thanks so much for joining us. A lot going on with this cabinet. What were your initial thoughts?
I think Carney did a really good job finding that balance between having established cabinet ministers from the Justin Trudeau era and introducing a lot of new people. I think we're surprised to see just how many brand new MPs are included in his cabinet. I think there was close to over 20 members of parliament who are now in cabinet who've never even served as members of parliament before. So definitely a change up there.
Now, Mandy Masti becomes the first Indigenous person to head up Indigenous Services Canada. What do you think of that historic pick?
I think I'm a bit on the fence on it, and only because I'm going to build off the words of Jody Wilson-Raybould, who served quite iconically in the Justice portfolio. It's really hard to be an Indigenous person serving in a ministerial capacity overseeing the very colonial Indian Act. And I think that's a delicate balance that Mandy Masti is going to have to balance. She definitely has that experience being a former Grand Chief of the Grand Council of the Cree. She's going to bring in that lived experience of being a elected official in a First Nation who navigates that system, but at the same time, she is now a First Nations woman in charge of a very colonial infrastructure. So finding that balance might be difficult.
And during maybe some tougher times than previous governments, in Manitoba there were calls for former Indigenous Services Minister Patty Haidu to be removed from her post over Jordan's principle. What do you see as Minister Masti's big challenges ahead?
I think it's really going to be striking that balance between being a First Nations woman who has held elected office in a First Nation, but working under the priorities of this elected Liberal government, this Canadian government, because I think there's going to be almost that expectation that having an Indigenous person in this role is going to alleviate some of the problems with Jordan's principle, with missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls with unmarked graves. There's going to be this perception, perhaps automatically, that this is a solution to the problem, but the structural issues are still there. They're not going to change at all. So I think that balance is what we're going to have to really look at.
Right. 3 Indigenous members of Parliament have become ministers, with Rebecca Chartrand also becoming Minister of Northern and Arctic Affairs, Buckley Belanger becoming Secretary of State for Rural Development. And I'll add to that the former Mayor of Yellowknife, Rebecca Olty, is the new Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. What do you think these picks mean for Indigenous peoples in the days ahead?
I'm glad to see that we have experienced people in these roles. I look at Buckley Belanger, for example. He served as a member of the Legislative Assembly for close to a decade. He has that deep legislative experience, even if he's a new member of Parliament. I think that we can also see, though, he was appointed for that regional representation. He's the only Liberal member of Parliament from Saskatchewan. It was likely he was going to have a seat at the table, and he is one of those secretaries of state, so one of those more secondary cabinet positions. I think Rebecca Chartrand's going to have a lot on her plate when we look at risks to Arctic sovereignty with the United States and with Russia. I think that Northern Affairs portfolio might be quite heavy, and we'll see how that works. And her relationships with Inuit, being an Anishinaabe woman and kind of having that perspective as well. And then again, Rebecca Olty, former Mayor of Yellowknife, I think, again, someone of deep experience who's coming to the table for that portfolio. And of course, Prime Minister Mark Carney is also from Northwest Territories himself, so we'll see how that interplays in this as well.
Do you have any thoughts on what these picks mean for what a Mark Carney government's going to look like here?
I think it's probably one of the strongest benches for Indigenous peoples who are cabinet ministers. I think when we look at some of those other portfolios, like Minister of Justice, that's always one that interplays quite significantly with the rights of Indigenous peoples, especially in sort of this post-UNDRIP era. Sean Fraser, who's sort of a rising star in the Liberal government, this is a huge jump for him, formerly Minister of Housing. He'll have a lot of work on his plate, and he's sort of given a lot of tasks that the Carney government might pass to him in the justice portfolio. We'll see how that plays out. We're going to see natural resources perhaps being developed at a pace under Carney that was faster than it was under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So again, we'll have to see how those new cabinet ministers engage in those conversations, especially with the rhetoric of Alberta sovereignty. That's going to be quite active. So seeing how a Carney cabinet negotiates that in relation to the rights of Indigenous peoples is going to be an interesting conversation.
Well, it's been an interesting day and interesting days ahead. Cody, appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thank you for having me.